I stood in my parents' living room, clutching the embroidered gift I'd spent 3 weeks making for my brother's engagement party. My hands shook as Nick looked straight at me with cold, unfamiliar eyes. "You're not invited to the wedding, Lauren. Don't come near it." The words hit me like ice water. Everyone in the room froze. Dad's glass stopped halfway to his lips. Mom's smile died on her face. Even the clock on the wall seemed to pause. His fiancée, Haley, stood beside him wearing this tiny, satisfied smirk that told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't sudden. This wasn't an accident. Someone had been working hard to erase me from my own brother's life, and she'd finally won. My throat closed up. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. The embroidered pillowcase in my hands suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I walked out of that house in a daze. Behind me, I heard Haley's sugar-sweet voice saying, "It's really for the best." My legs barely carried me to my car. I sat there in the driveway, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. Then the tears came. They poured out of me like a broken dam. I sobbed so hard my chest hurt. How did I get here? How did my own brother, the kid I practically raised, look at me like I was a stranger? Like I was the enemy? The last image stuck in my head was Nick's face. Distant, blank, like he'd forgotten every sacrifice I ever made for him. My heart shattered into pieces right there in that car. But underneath all that pain, something else started to grow. It was small at first, just a tiny spark. Anger. Not the screaming kind, but the cold, quiet kind that waits and watches. My name is Lauren Pierce, and Nick wasn't always like this. We grew up in this small Pennsylvania town where everyone knew everyone. Life was normal until I turned 16. That's when Mom got sick. Cancer took her fast. Too fast. One day she was making us breakfast, and 6 months later we were burying her. Dad fell apart. He couldn't handle being both parents, so I stepped up. I was just a kid myself, but Nick was only 11. He needed someone. I became his second mother overnight. I helped with homework, made his lunches, went to his soccer games. When I got accepted to my dream college 3 states away, I turned it down. How could I leave him? Instead, I went to community college nearby and got a job. Every dollar I earned went toward keeping our little family together. I first met Haley at a family barbecue last summer. Nick had been mysteriously busy for weeks, always making excuses why we couldn't hang out. Then he showed up that Saturday with her attached to his arm like an expensive accessory. She wore designer everything. Sunglasses, purse, shoes. Her smile was bright and perfect, but her eyes, they studied everyone like she was calculating something. "You must be the famous Lauren," she said, shaking my hand. Her grip was firm, almost aggressive. "Nick talks about you constantly. It's so sweet how close you two are." The way she said close made it sound wrong, like something unhealthy. I remember getting this weird feeling in my gut, like when you know a storm's coming but can't see the clouds yet. I smiled back anyway, wanting to give her a chance. Maybe I was just being protective. The isolation started slowly. At first, I thought Nick was just busy with work and wedding planning. My texts would sit unread for hours, then days. Phone calls went straight to voicemail. Sunday dinners at Dad's house suddenly happened without me knowing. I'd find out from neighbors who saw everyone's cars there. When I finally confronted Dad about it, he looked uncomfortable. "Haley just wants some space to bond with the family before the wedding," he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. "She thinks too many people hovering makes Nick stressed." Too many people. I was his sister, not some random cousin. But I bit my tongue and backed off, thinking maybe she had a point. Maybe I was being too clingy. Maybe I needed to let Nick grow up and have his own life. That's what I told myself as the weeks passed and the silence grew louder. Then the lies started spreading. My best friend Amy pulled me aside at the grocery store one day. She looked worried. "Lauren, I don't know how to tell you this, but people are saying you tried to break up Nick and Haley." My blood ran cold. "What? Who's saying that?" Amy bit her lip. "Haley told her book club that you don't think any woman is good enough for your brother. That you've been interfering with their relationship and making things difficult. Felt sick. None of it was true. I'd barely even seen Nick since he got engaged. But in our small town, rumors spread like wildfire. Suddenly, people at church gave me weird looks. The lady at the post office, who'd known me since I was a kid, seemed cold. I wanted to scream the truth to defend myself. But who would believe me over the sweet, pretty fiancé? Nick's birthday in September felt like my last chance. I bought him an expensive watch and had it engraved with a quote Mom used to say, "Brothers and sisters are forever." I showed up at the restaurant where they were having dinner with a few friends. The moment I walked in, the table went quiet. Haley's smile was sharp as a knife. "Lauren, what a surprise." She stood up and intercepted me before I could reach Nick. "Let me take that gift for you." I handed over the wrapped box, hopeful. Nick barely looked at me. "Thanks," he said flatly. The dinner was awkward and short. 3 days later, I was taking out my trash when I saw something shiny in Nick's garbage bin next to mine. My heart sank. The watch, still in its box, thrown away like trash. The engraving caught the sunlight, mocking me. Something inside me cracked. Not broke, cracked. A thin, sharp line that would eventually split wide open. The engagement party was my public humiliation. Dad had quietly told me I should come, that maybe showing up would smooth things over. I dressed carefully, brought a bottle of expensive wine, and walked into that decorated backyard trying to hold my head high. The moment I appeared, conversations stopped. People stared. Haley was across the yard, and I watched her face light up with something that looked like victory. She wrapped both arms around Nick's waist and called out sweetly, "Oh, Lauren, you came." Everyone could hear the surprise in her voice, the implication that I wasn't supposed to be there. I stood there like an idiot, holding my wine bottle, while 100 people watched me realize I was the uninvited guest at my own brother's party. I lasted maybe 20 minutes before I left, my face burning with shame. Nobody stopped me. Nick found me in the driveway. His face twisted with anger I'd never seen before. "What are you doing here?" he hissed. "You're making Haley uncomfortable. You're ruining everything." I stared at this stranger wearing my brother's face. "Nick, I'm your sister. I just wanted to celebrate with you." He laughed, but it was cold. "You don't want to celebrate. You want to control me like you always have." Haley helped me see that. "All those years you took care of me. You were just making me dependent on you. You never wanted me to grow up and leave." The words cut deeper than any knife could. "That's not true," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I loved you. I gave up everything for you." He shook his head. "No. You gave up everything to keep me under your thumb. I'm done, Lauren. Stay away from me and my fiancé." He walked back inside, leaving me shaking in the dark. I drove home in a fog. For 3 days, I barely left my bed. I cried until I had no tears left. Then, on the 4th day, something changed. I got up, took a shower, and pulled out an old photo album. Page after page showed me and Nick as kids. Me teaching him to ride a bike. Me at his middle school graduation when Dad was too depressed to come. Me helping him pack for college. The bond we had was real. The sacrifices were real. Haley could twist the story all she wanted, but the truth lived in these photos. I closed the album slowly. "You want me gone," I said to my empty apartment. "Fine. But I don't disappear. I wait." Something cold and determined settled in my chest. I wasn't going to beg anymore. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I was going to watch and listen and wait for the truth to show itself. The next few months were strange. I kept my distance like Nick wanted, but I paid attention. Haley was very active on social media, posting constantly about her perfect life and perfect relationship. I noticed things. Small things. She claimed to be a marketing director at some big firm, but the company name kept changing in her posts. She posted photos from a family beach house that I reverse searched and found on a rental website. She talked about her college years at Penn State, but her stories never quite lined up. I started taking screenshots, not sure why. just a feeling that these little lies meant something bigger. I also noticed how she talked about Nick's family, our family. She'd post things like finally having a real family dinner, as if we hadn't existed before her. The comments were full of people praising her, telling her how lucky Nick was. Made my stomach turn. Then, in early December, I got a message on social media from someone named Tara. "You don't know me," it started, "but I saw the engagement photos of Haley Monroe. I need to talk to you." My heart started pounding. I called the number she sent. Tara's voice was shaky but firm. "Haley ruined my life 2 years ago. She was engaged to my brother, Blake. She seemed perfect at first, just like I'm sure she does with Nick." I gripped my phone tighter. "What happened?" Tara took a deep breath. "She isolated him from our family, said we were toxic and controlling. She convinced him to give her access to his bank accounts to plan their future. Then, 2 weeks before the wedding, she emptied everything and disappeared. Blake found out her whole identity was fake. Her job, her education, even her last name. We tried to press charges, but she was good at covering her tracks. Tara sent me everything she had. Screenshots of text messages where Haley manipulated Blake. Bank statements showing the stolen money. Photos proving Haley had used a different last name back then. Bennett, not Monroe. There were emails between Haley and Blake where she slowly turned him against his family, using the exact same words she'd used on Nick. "You're too dependent on your sister. They're holding you back. Real love means choosing me over them." I sat at my kitchen table, reading through everything with shaking hands. This wasn't just about me. Haley was a professional. She'd done this before, and she'd probably do it again. The pattern was clear. Find a lonely guy with family money or assets, isolate him, take what she could, and vanish. But this time was different. This time, Nick's family was still in the picture. And this time I had proof. I didn't rush. That was the hardest part, waiting when every cell in my body wanted to run to Nick and show him the truth. But I knew better. If I went to him now, Haley would spin it. She'd say I was so desperate that I invented lies about her. Nick would believe her because he wanted to believe her. No, I needed the timing to be perfect. The exposure had to be public and undeniable. I printed everything Tara sent me. I organized it in a timeline, double-checked every fact, and even hired a private investigator to verify Haley's fake credentials. Everything checked out. She was a con artist, plain and simple. I decided the wedding was the right moment. Not because I wanted to ruin Nick's day, but because it was the one time everyone who mattered would be in the same room. The truth needed witnesses. Nick's wedding date approached, March 23rd. I didn't go to the rehearsal dinner. I didn't send a gift. I didn't call or text. To everyone else, it looked like I'd finally given up and accepted defeat. Dad called me the week before, his voice sad. "I wish things were different, sweetheart. I know you're hurting." I wanted to tell him what I knew, but I held back. "It's okay, Dad. Everything will work out the way it's supposed to." Haley must have felt triumphant. She'd successfully erased me from Nick's life. Her wedding would be perfect, and I'd be nothing but a bitter memory. The calm before the storm was almost peaceful. I spent those final days preparing myself mentally. What I was about to do would either save my brother or make him hate me forever. Either way, the truth had to come out. The morning of March 23rd, I woke up early. I put on a simple navy dress. Nothing flashy, nothing attention-seeking. I did my makeup carefully, wanting to look calm and composed. My old friend Casey, who worked at the wedding venue as an event coordinator, had agreed to help me. She'd always known there was something off about how Nick treated me. "You sure about this?" she asked when I arrived at the venue through the back entrance. He nodded. "I've never been more sure about anything." Casey led me through the service corridors to the reception hall. It was decorated beautifully. White roses everywhere, gold accents, soft lighting. It must have cost a fortune. I felt a pang of sadness. This could have been a real celebration if Haley hadn't been a lie wrapped in a wedding dress. We worked quickly. On each of the 30 tables, I placed an elegant cream envelope. The outside simply said, "The truth about Haley Monroe." Inside was a packet. Copies of Tara's statement, bank records from Blake's case, screenshots of Haley's fake credentials, and photos proving her identity fraud. The final page was a letter I'd written myself, short and factual, explaining that I was sharing this information not out of spite, but out of love for my brother. I included Tara's contact information so people could verify everything. Casey watched me with wide eyes. "This is going to explode," she whispered. "I know," I said quietly. "But he needs to know who he's marrying." We finished just as guests started arriving. I slipped back out through the service entrance and found a spot near the venue where I could watch without being seen. My heart hammered in my chest. There was no going back now. The ceremony started at 2 o'clock. Through a window, I watched guests file into their seats. Dad looked handsome in his suit but sad around the eyes. Nick stood at the altar in a tuxedo, looking nervous and excited. Then the music swelled and Haley appeared. I had to admit she looked stunning. Her white dress must have cost thousands. Her smile was radiant. She walked down that aisle like a princess in a fairy tale. Nick's face when he saw her was full of pure love. My heart broke a little. He really did love her, or at least the version of her she'd shown him. The officiant began speaking. They exchanged vows. Haley's voice trembled as she promised to love and cherish Nick forever. In sickness and in health, for richer or poorer. The irony of those words nearly made me laugh. Then they were pronounced husband and wife. Everyone cheered. I watched my brother kiss his new bride, and I felt nothing but sadness for what was about to happen. The reception started an hour later. Guests moved into the decorated hall, finding their assigned tables. That's when they saw the envelopes. I watched through the service entrance window as confusion spread across the room. People picked up the packets, opened them, started reading. First there were puzzled looks, then shocked expressions, then gasps. One woman's hand flew to her mouth. A man stood up abruptly, staring at the papers. The murmurs grew louder. Phones came out as people started taking photos of the documents. At the head table, Nick was laughing at something Dad said, completely oblivious. Haley was checking her makeup in a compact mirror. Neither of them noticed the growing chaos around them. Then Uncle Paul, Dad's brother, walked up to the head table holding one of the packets. "Nick," he said loudly, "you need to see this. Right now." The room fell silent. Nick took the packet with a confused smile. That smile died as he read the first page. His face went from tan to pale in seconds. "What is this?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Haley leaned over to look. When she saw what he was holding, her face transformed. The sweet, gentle mask cracked right down the middle. "Where did this come from?" she demanded, her voice sharp and nothing like her usual soft tone. Nick kept reading, flipping through pages, his hands shaking. "Is this true? Haley, is any of this true?" She grabbed for the packet, but he pulled it away. "Baby, no, listen to me. This is all lies. Someone is trying to ruin our wedding. It's probably your sister. Lauren did this because she's jealous." But Nick wasn't listening anymore. He was reading Tara's statement. Reading about how Haley had done this exact same thing to another man. Reading the bank records. Seeing the proof that her job was fake, her degree was fake, her last name was fake. That's when I stepped into the hall. Every head turned toward me. The room was dead silent except for the soft music still playing from the speakers. I walked slowly, calmly, my hands steady at my sides. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. My presence alone answered every question hanging in the air. Nick looked at me, and I saw recognition flash in his eyes. Not anger, recognition. Like he was seeing his real sister for the first time in months. Like he was waking up from a long nightmare. "Lauren," he breathed. Haley's head snapped toward me, and her face twisted with pure rage. "Ooh, you did this. You ruined everything." She started toward me, heels clicking on the hardwood floor, hands reaching like claws. But Nick stepped between us. "Don't," he said to Haley, his voice hard. "Just don't." She stared at him in disbelief. "You're defending her. After everything she's done to us. Everything she's done." Nick's voice rose. "You mean like raising me when our mom died? Paying for my college? Being there for every important moment of my life while you—" He shook the papers in his hand. "While you were apparently lying about your entire existence." Haley's composure shattered completely. "That's not, you don't understand. Blake was different, he deserved it, but I really love you, Nick." The room gasped. She just admitted it was true. Security guards were moving toward us now, called by Casey. Haley saw them coming and tried one last time. She grabbed Nick's arm, tears streaming down her face. "Please, baby, we can fix this. We can leave right now, just you and me. Forget all these people. Forget your family. We don't need them." Nick pulled his arm away like she'd burned him. "Get out," he said quietly. Then louder. "Get out of here. Now." The security guards took her by the elbows. She screamed the whole way out, calling me names, calling Nick weak. Her voice echoing through the hall until the doors finally closed behind her. The reception hall stayed silent for what felt like forever. Then people started talking all at once, their voices building into a roar of shock and disbelief. Nick stood frozen in the middle of it all, still in his tuxedo, holding the papers that destroyed his wedding day. Dad rushed over to him and Uncle Paul and a few other family members. They formed a protective circle around him. I stayed where I was, near the back of the room. I wasn't here to gloat or celebrate. I was here because the truth mattered more than a pretty lie. Nick looked at me over the heads of the people surrounding him. Our eyes met across the chaos. I saw pain there and shame and the beginning of understanding. I nodded once, turned and walked out. Let him process this without me hovering. I'd done what I needed to do. The rest was up to him. 3 weeks passed before Nick showed up at my apartment. I opened the door to find him standing there looking hollow, like someone had scooped out his insides. He'd lost weight. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. I stepped aside. We sat in my living room, the silence heavy between us. Finally Nick spoke. "I'm sorry doesn't even begin to cover it." His voice cracked. "You tried to be there for me, and I threw it in your face. I believed her lies about you. I said horrible things. I stayed quiet, letting him get it all out. She's gone," he continued. "Completely vanished. The police are looking for her, but they don't think they'll find her. She's done this before." He looked at me with tears in his eyes. "You saved me, Lauren. If you hadn't stopped that wedding, she would have destroyed my life." Finally spoke. "I didn't do it to punish you, Nick. I did it because you're my brother and family protects family. Even when that family pushes you away." 6 months later, Nick was working hard to rebuild trust, seeing a therapist to understand how he'd been manipulated. He'd apologized to Dad, to our relatives, to everyone Haley had turned him against. Our relationship was slowly healing. I enrolled in online classes to finally finish the degree I'd postponed years ago. I opened a small design business from home, creating custom embroidery pieces. Ironic, considering the engagement gift that started everything. Nick came to my first art show at the local community center. He stood in front of one of my pieces for a long time, a family tree I'd stitched with Mom's name at the roots. "She'd be proud of you," he said softly, "for not giving up on me even when I deserved it." I squeezed his hand. "Family isn't just blood, Nick. It's loyalty. It's showing up even when it's hard. And when betrayal ends, that's when real healing begins." We stood there together, my brother and me, finally on the same side again.